Hello everyone! Would you like to draw attention with a special chart in your reports? Take a look at this one. It's a custom chart similar to a bar and bar chart, but with columns, and compares the actual sales performance to the target performance. And it's also animated. Every time the filter selection changes, the columns begin to grow slowly and leave your audience anticipating the outcome. They also turn green if the target is met. Because animation is more typical for Microsoft PowerPoint, your audience will be guessing how to do it. Well, it needs a little visual basic for applications. Let's start. Until we start with the macro, let's first prepare the custom chart. In the first step, we need to convert the data range to a table. This is done by selecting it and pressing Ctrl and T together. By changing the data to a table, I can insert a slicer, for example, chocolate type. This will help to filter the table easier and faster. Now let's resize the columns to make them look better. Change the design of the table to a simpler one. And add a column chart. In the chart, I will remove the grid lines to make the chart look better. And in the chart title, I'm going to write the actual sales. I will remove the actual sales from the legend, and I will use 3 colors of blue for the chart area, the target sales, and the actual sales. With the actual sales being the darkest color. Now to get that column and column effect, I'm going to overlap the series to 100%, and I'm going to transfer the actual sales to a secondary axis because I want the gap width for the target sales to be different, because I want the columns to be wider. Now let's make sure that the actual sales have no border. And in the last step, fix the scales of both axes, both primary and secondary axes. This is important because they have to be the same. They have to have the same scaling because otherwise the ratio of the actual sales to the target sales will not be correctly shown. So I'm going to fix the minimum point, the maximum, and the major units. And now we can start with the macro. To make the columns build up slowly, the macro will use the following logic. If I select the actual sales series and check how it is filled with color, so if I go under fill, instead of a solid fill, I can choose a gradient fill. And under gradient fill, if I just leave 2 gradient stops, change the color of the first gradient stop to the color of the series, and color the second gradient stop white, and not only white, but also fully transparent, so that I can completely see through it. And also, if I choose the direction of the fill to be linear up, then I will see the following interesting effect. If both of the gradient stops are on the same position and move simultaneously, then the effect is as if a column is building itself up slowly. With this logic in mind, I'm going to write the macro. The macro will have to be embedded into the sheet itself and get triggered by filter change. But changes of the filter cannot trigger macros, but calculations can. So we will need either some kind of a calculation on the sheet that will be recalculated when the filter selection changes, or a dummy. As a dummy, I will just use a simple cell reference. And I will set B6 to equal B17. And I will cover it up with the slicer. Now let's open the Visual Basic Editor with combination Alt and F11 and start writing the macro. To embed the macro into the sheet, I'm going to select Sheet 1, Worksheet, and I need a different kind of event. So I'm going to choose Calculate and delete the previous suggestion and start writing. First, let's declare the variables. Our chart is going to be the chart that we're working on. Our series is going to be the actual sales. Other series is going to be the target sales. P is going to be the point number in the chart, so it's an integer. And I is going to be the value of the column, and it's going to be built up slowly, so it's a double because it can be decimal. Let's define the variables. So our chart is going to be the chart number 12 on the active sheet. So in case you don't remember how to see the name of the chart, you have to select the chart and look in the left corner, and it's called chart 12. The series names you can determine, so you just have to select the series, and here you can see that actual sales are series 1 and the target sales are series 2. So our chart is going to be chart 12 on the active sheet. Our series is going to be the first series of our chart. And other series is going to be the second series. Now I'm going to assign the gradient fill to our series. So the filling is going to have a 2-color gradient. Horizontal, and with variant 2. This will correspond to the effect we saw earlier. The first gradient stop should have the original color of blue. In case you don't remember the color combinations, you can go here, look under colors, more colors, custom colors, and here you can see the different combinations for the colors. The second gradient stop should be white. This is a combination for white. And at the beginning, both gradient stops should have the position of 0. Also, the second gradient stop, the white one, should be completely transparent. So I'll put it to 1, meaning 100%. Width is very handy when we have several properties that we want to assign. So basically, I'll write each of the properties on a different row. Now let's start the loop. So for p from 1 to the number of countable points that are visible in the chart, so for each of the columns basically, starting from 1 to the number of the countable ones, for I from 0 to the corresponding value from the array of the values of our series, in steps of 1 should be performed the following action. First, the coloring. So the equivalent point of our series should be filled according to the following condition. If I is more than the equivalent value of other series, meaning of a target series, then the gradient stop 1 should be colored green. Else, if, so second condition, if I is less than the target value, then the gradient stop 1's color should be red. Else, the gradient stop 1's color should remain blue. End of the condition. And now the positions of the gradient points. So gradient stop 1's position has to be I divided by the value of the corresponding data point. And the same goes also for the gradient point too, because as you remember, they have to move at the same time. So why do we have to divide? It's because the gradient stop's position is from 0 to 100%. So it has to be a fraction. That's why the division. So the percentage of I, or in this case fraction of I, to our series value of the corresponding point is going to be the position of gradient stop 1 and gradient stop 2. End with, and I will add Doevents. Doevents lets the chart update itself during the iterative process. So combination of Doevents with the stepwise growth of I is what accounts for the slow growth of the columns. By setting the number after step, I can decide on the speed of the growth of the columns. So changing 1 to 2 or 3 would make the columns grow faster. Now let's finalize the loop and check the result. Let's sort the actual sales in descending order. And the coloring works. The columns are building themselves up slowly, and as soon as actual sales are larger than target sales, the column turns green. Such a chart can convey two pieces of information, namely who are the top performers in descending order, and at the same time if the performance exceeded the target or not. For example, the white chocolate brand B has not met its target despite high sales. Let's change the filter selection. For example, choose white chocolate. Again, the columns build themselves up slowly, and as soon as the target value is exceeded, the column turns green. But what if we have an impatient user who does not wait for the columns to get filled up properly and changes the selection until the macro is finished? For example, if the user chooses total selection and then clicks away hastily to white until the columns are filled. What will happen here is that Doevents will finish the current selection and then will continue the iterations from the previous one. And as soon as it reaches a point it can no longer find in this selection, the macro will crash. To avoid this, we need to amend the code. If I just add on error, resume next for troubleshooting, then what will happen is that the macro will not crash anymore, but it will continue recoloring the columns from the previous iteration once the current iteration is finished. So here it started recoloring the columns. To avoid this, we need another small amendment to the code. Namely, at the end of the code, I will write end. This command deletes all variables, and so the macro will not recolor the columns anymore. But if you have several macros together, end may also affect the variables in those, depending where your macros are. So just keep an eye out for your other macros. Let's test. So I'm clicking from the total selection quickly to white. And the columns do not get recolored. On error, resume next is also not required anymore. I'll take it out and try again. And everything works. Let me show you the complete macro once again. If you would like to use this code in your own files, please adapt these 3 lines. So at the moment, the macro is working with chart 12 on the active sheet, and our series, meaning the actual sales, are series 1 of this chart, and the target values, the other series, are the series 2 of this chart. So please adapt the sheet name, the chart number, and the series numbers. And please don't forget to embed the macro into the sheet where your dummy is. If this video inspired you, please like and subscribe for more practical spreadsheet solutions.